Okay, so let me get into the thing that I wanted to read. This is a really interesting article from foreignpolicy.com. And again, we're going to talk about the myth of green growth. It seems to be a theme lately. And it's a good one because right now is a good time to have this conversation around, because people are talking about a Green New Deal, because people are talking about climate change so much, and it's going to become more front and center as time goes on, obviously, because the climate is going to get worse. We're going to have more heat waves, more drought, more wildfires, more hurricanes. And people are going to go, hey, this climate change thing is pretty important. And then they're going to be, what are we going to do about it? And a bunch of people are going to go, Green New Deal, right? So hold on, hold the presses. Maybe not. Maybe that's not the answer. Because that seems to be just now a knee-jerk thing, especially in the political class. We've got to implement a Green New Deal. It's the only way forward. A celebrated new book shows U.S. capitalism doesn't need to damage the planet. One problem, its data is flawed. This is from June 18th, 2020. Scientists are increasingly concerned about the impact that excess industrial activity is having on our planet's ecosystems. Our pursuit of perpetual economic growth is driving ever-increasing levels of material extraction, which is causing a wide range of ecological problems: deforestation, soil depletion, habitat loss, and species extinction. The crisis has become so severe that last year more than 11,000 scientists, listen, this is important, 11,000 scientists from over 150 countries published an article calling on governments to shift toward post-growth economic models. So these scientists have brains that are functioning in positive ways because they understand it's the growth. It's let's turn around. It's the economy, stupid. Let's turn it around and call it it's growth, stupid. How about that for a hashtag? It's growth, stupid. Focusing on human well-being and ecological stability rather than constant expansion. Ding, ding, ding. But some figures have rejected this idea, and are rallying around a different narrative altogether. In a book published last October titled More from Less. So this is what Michael Moore, Planet of the Humans, was talking about. Post-growth. We need to do something different than what we're doing now. But no. We have people saying, hey, hold on. We can have growth and lower our emissions at the same time. It's magic. Some figures have rejected this idea and rallying around a different narrative altogether. In a book published last October titled More from Less, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology-based technologist Andrew McAfee argues that we can continue to grow global GDP indefinitely. Indefinitely. Galaxy brain. This guy's a technologist. While reducing our ecological impact at the same time, and all without any structural, much less revolutionary changes to the economy or society. This man has been smoking so much hopium. This man has all the hopium, has bought it all, and is going to smoke it all. At the core of McAfee's argument is his analysis of the U.S. economy. He claims that U.S. consumption of resources has remained steady or even declined since the 1980s, while GDP has continued to rise. In other words, the United States is dematerializing, quote unquote, thanks to increasing efficient technology and a shift towards services. The same thing has been happening in other high-income nations. He says, this is, what the green growthers are always like, look at what we're doing. Great strides we're making. This proves green growth can be achieved. Rich countries are showing the way, and the rest of the world should follow suit. You guys see the holes in this logic already? It's a striking claim, and it has garnered attention from a number of high-profile commentators and policymakers. More from Less received exuberant endorsements from the writer Steven Pinker, European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde, oh yeah, and the economist Larry Summers, plus CEOs, bankers, and a number of Silicon Valley celebrities. Of course, they love it. They love it. The Bloomberg columnist Noah Smith has repeatedly leaned, on McAfee to bolster his own narrative about green growth. Green growth sounds kind of slimy. People find solace in this story because it means there's no need to worry. We don't need to rethink our growth-based economy or question the consumption patterns of rich countries. We can just carry on with business as usual and everything will be fine. It's an alibi for inaction. There's only one problem. McAfee's argument is based on a fundamental accounting error, right? So I was talking about somebody who was quoting, the fact that electrical consumption emissions have gone down in the US and the UK, and I was like, well, what are they leaving out in there? They're leaving out a lot, but that's all fine and well, but what are they're leaving? There's got to be something that they're externalizing, emissions they're externalizing somewhere else. McAfee uses data on domestic material consumption, which tallies up the resources that a nation extracts and consumes each year. But this metric ignores a crucial piece of the puzzle. While it includes the imported goods a country consumes, it does not include the resources involved in extracting, producing, and transporting those goods. Because the United States and other rich countries have offshored, this is important, so much of their production to poorer countries over the past 40 years. That side of resource use has been conveniently shifted off their books, right? So yeah, we've closed down all kinds of coal-burning plants in the US and the UK. This is great. This is wonderful. But they're building more coal-fired plants where? In China, in India, where all of our stuff is being made, right? So we just shifted it somewhere else. In other words, what looks like green growth is really just an artifact of globalization. Given how much the U.S. economy relies on offshore production, McAfee's data cannot be legitimately compared to U.S. GDP and cannot be used to make claims about dematerialization. Also remember that all the shipping involved in these products that we buy from all the way across the other side of the world, how much of those emissions are tallied up in our total emissions. Ecological economists have been aware of this problem for a long time. To correct for it, they use a more holistic metric called raw material consumption, which fully accounts for trade. When we look at this data, which is readily available from the United Nations, the story changes completely. We see that total resource use in the United States hasn't been falling at all. In fact, it has been rising more or less exactly in line with GDP. The same is true of all other major industrial economies, including the European Union and the OECD as a group. There has been zero dematerialization, no green growth. It was all an illusion of accounting. Exactly. I mean, I don't know how we can continue to have every year we consume, 1.5 times the planet in resources or more. Now it's like 1.8 times the planet. And the day in which we have reached our resource limit of the entire planet gets earlier every single year. So I don't know how you can spin that into, we're getting better, guys. This is a problem because McAfee holds rich nations up as an example for the rest of the world to follow. But if rich nations are achieving green growth by offshoring, then this approach by definition cannot be universalized. Exactly. And that, again, that bumps up right against the whole argument that when all these other countries, less industrialized countries, raise their standard of living, when everybody's living like we do in the United States, then birth rates will fall and, we're going to use, we're not going to consume as much. Everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be awesome. Where will the rest of the world offshore to? Mars, of course. This is why when we zoom out and look at the world economy as a whole, where trade no longer makes a difference, We see that global resource use hasn't been slowing down at all, no matter what metric you use. In fact, it has been accelerating since 2000, rising at historically unprecedented rate, even to the point of outstripping GDP. In other words, the world economy has been materializing. It's the exact opposite of green growth. You can see the graph here. This is beautiful. It's a beautiful graph. It's the best graph. It's a wonderful graph. Yeah. So this is what's happening. Up, up, up we go. We need a thneed. We need to make more thneeds. Who doesn't need a thneed? Ecologists say that the planet can handle a maximum annual resource use of about 50 billion metric tons per year. We crossed that boundary in the late 1990s, and today we're overshooting it by more than 90%. This is what's driving ecological breakdown. Every additional ton of material extraction has an impact on the planet's ecosystems. Crucially, high-income nations are the worst offenders here. Of course they are. Not the saviors that McAfee claims. Rich countries consume a staggering 28 tons of material stuff per person per year, nearly 4 times more than the sustainable per capita boundary. Again, you want to help with climate change? You want to help with ecological destruction? Stop consuming so much stuff. It's really very simple. Stop buying so much stuff. Stop using so much stuff. Learn how to, you already bought a bunch of stuff. Don't go out and Maria Kondo or whatever her name is. Don't start throwing all the stuff you bought away. Use it up. Use it well, okay? Don't just be like, I got to get rid of this stuff right now and throw everything outside of your house, and then you're like, oh, wait, I got to go back out to the store and buy the stuff that I threw away. Don't do that, okay? Don't do that. Use the stuff you got. Stop buying new stuff. In the United States, it's up to 35 tons. 35 tons in the United States of material stuff per person per year. Ouch. If everyone consumed like the United States, global resource use would run up to a staggering 260 billion tons per year. Right now, we are at 92 billion tons. To get a sense for what this would be like, imagine our existing crisis multiplied by a factor of 3. Yeah. This might seem like strange results when you consider that high-income nations have undergone an extraordinary shift to services over the past few years. It seems reasonable to believe, as McAfee does, that this should lead to less resource use, but things haven't turned out that way. Why not? The main reason is that incomes earned in the service sector end up being used to buy material goods. Someone might make money from YouTube, but then spend it on furniture and cars. But it's also that most services are resource intensive in their own right. Cruise ships, airlines, hotels, resorts, real estate, retail, tourism all require significant material inputs. Given the evidence from the past few years, or decades, there's no reason to believe that shifting to services is somehow magically going to reduce our resource use. It's time to put that myth aside. What about technological innovation? McAfee argues that efficiency improvements will cut resource use. In theory, that's true. Also, all else being equal, But in growth-oriented economies, savings from efficiency improvements are typically reinvested to expand the process of production and consumption. Right. Exactly. And we also have to update those efficiencies all the time, right? You have to buy a new computer, a new refrigerator, a new stove, a new, blah, blah, blah. And these have to be repurchased every, 10 years to be efficient still, are typically reinvested to expand the process of production and consumption, which ends up causing aggregate resource use to rise. For instance, if a soda company finds ways to use less metals in its cans, it will immediately invest in any savings into expanding the business by, say, pumping out advertising to get people to buy more soda, right? And this is Jevons paradox, right? Efficiencies generally tend to lead to more usage and more consumption, not less. Yeah. In other words, growth ends up wiping out the gains we achieve through efficiency improvements, and this raises a real challenge in terms of policy going forward. If technology hasn't helped us reduce total resource use so far, it doesn't make any sense to hope that it will somehow magically happen in the future. Don't get me wrong. We need all the technological innovation we can get in our fight against ecological breakdown, but ultimately it's not our technology that's the problem. It's growth. It's growth, stupid. On top of all of this, scientists are beginning to discover that there are physical limits to how efficiently we can use resources. Sure, we might be able to produce lighter soda cans, but we can't produce them out of thin air. We might shift the economy to services like gyms and restaurants, but even those require material inputs indeed. There is always a limit to how lightweight something can be. Once we approach that limit, the continued growth causes resource use to start rising again. This question was recently studied in detail by a team of scientists in Australia. They ran a series of models with extremely optimistic rates of efficiency, faster than anything that's ever been achieved before. What they found is that while resource use might decline temporarily, it quickly recouples with GDP as we reach the limits of efficiency. This evidence throws real doubt on green growth narratives. It is misleading, they concluded, to develop growth-oriented policy around expectation that decoupling is possible. I thought we were almost done there. This goes on. Okay, we are almost done. So where does this leave us? What are our options if we want to reduce resource use, which we must do if we are to avert ecological collapse? Then we cannot wait around for dematerialization to somehow miraculously occur when all the evidence suggests it's not going to happen. We need to be smarter than that. The only fail-safe strategy is to impose legally binding caps on resource use and gradually ratchet it back down to safe levels. Legally binding caps. What do you guys think about that? How about implementing less use in your own life? We can start there too. Ecological economists have been calling for this for decades. In a way, this is an elegant solution to the long-standing debate about green growth. If McAfee and others really believe that GDP will keep growing despite active reductions in material use, then this shouldn't worry them one bit. In fact, they should welcome such a move. It will give them a chance to prove once and for all that they are right. But to my knowledge, not a single proponent of green growth has ever agreed to this proposal. Perhaps on some deep level, despite the rosy rhetoric, they realize that this isn't how capitalism actually works. Right. If you start talking about downsizing economies or downsizing companies, oh my God, the alarm bells go off. For 200 years, capitalism has depended on extraction from nature. It has always needed an outside, external to itself, from which it can plunder surplus value for free or as close to free as possible. To put a limit on material extraction is to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. There is a deeper question that we need to address here. Indeed. McAfee and others go to such extraordinary extents to justify perpetual economic expansion because they start from the assumption that we need it. They assume that GDP is necessary for human well-being. Indeed, they seem to see it as a proxy for human progress itself. Oh, the lies. But is it true? The evidence suggests otherwise. Let's take the United States, for example. The United States has an extraordinary GDP growth over the past 4 decades, but oddly enough, real wages are lower today than they were in the 70s, and poverty rates are higher. Why? Because virtually all the gains from growth have gone to those who are already rich. And you should already know this if you have any eyeballs or brain cells at all. The incomes of the richest 1% have more than tripled since 1980, soaring to an average of 1.5 million per person. In other words, we've all been pressing on the accelerator of growth with devastating consequences for the living world, all to make rich people richer. When you look at it this way, it becomes clear that the United States doesn't need more growth in order to improve people's lives. The old trickle-down theory. We can do it right now without any growth at all, simply by sharing what we already have more fairly. Golly, but we couldn't possibly do that. Equity is the antidote to growth, and a much saner way to achieve our social goals. The key point to grasp here is that beyond a certain level, which high-income nations have long since surpassed, the relationship between GDP and well-being completely breaks down. There are dozens of countries that outperform the United States on every indicator of human well-being with significantly less GDP. Take life expectancy, for example. Japan beats the United States in life expectancy by more than 5 years with 35% less GDP per capita. South Korea also beats the United States with 50% less GDP per capita. Portugal, too, with 65% less, 65. Costa Ricans live longer, healthier lives than Americans with 80% less GDP per capita. There you go. All of that is a lie. Our whole the whole narrative about capitalism making people, healthy and wealthy is a lie. We can see the same pattern playing out when it comes to every measure of human progress, from education to employment, healthcare to happiness, over and over again. Empirical data shows that it is possible to achieve high levels of human welfare without high levels of GDP with significantly less pressure on the planet. How? By sharing income more fairly and investing in universal healthcare, education, and other public goods. Progressivism is good. The evidence is clear when it comes to delivering long, healthy, flourishing lives for all. This is what counts. This is what progress looks like. I hope you all enjoyed that article as I did. Again, pointing out the ridiculous argument that, we need to keep on growing. It's fine if rich people keep getting richer and poor people get poorer. We're going to export our wonderful way of life, which everybody envies, to the rest of the world. Oh my God. Yes, Gene, Costa Rica is a good example. Hey guys, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. You can also support the channel at the links below: PayPal, Square, and Patreon. Also, all of my live streams are available for listening on Patreon if you happen to miss them during the day. So you can sign up for my Patreon for as little as $1. If you want to go check out the live streams, they are all there. Thanks a lot.